On this episode of FieldLink, we catch up with two National FFA officers as they recap their experience on a recent visit to Memphis, Tennessee to visit with Helena CEO Eric Cowling and other leadership to discuss the importance of agriculture education and the impact that FFA has on our industry. Plus, the two members will share some of their perspective on what they learned in the laboratory and research and development department at the Helena Products Group. Then we travel to Nashville to catch up with Jody Lawrence to discuss how the recent bombings of Iran is impacting the commodity markets. Stay tuned for this episode of FieldLink. And welcome back to FieldLink. I'm your host, Bill Smith, and we have two special guests today with us. Joining us here in Memphis at the FieldLink Podcast studio, we have the National FFA President, Thad Bergschneider. Thad, welcome to FieldLink.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And joining him is also the Vice President for the National FFA Association, Carolyn Groth. Carolyn, welcome.
Thank you so much.
It's good to have you back on the FieldLink Podcast.
Yes.
Round two, we were together at the Commodity Classic last spring.
Yeah, it seems like a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to have you both here in Memphis today. You had the opportunity to tour, meet with some of our executives here at Helena, as well as tour some of the facilities at the Helena Products Group. So we're certainly going to talk about that today. But before we dive into some of your, the details around your visit, let's talk a little bit about you and then talk a little bit about the FFA, what's going on today. So, Thad, why don't you start us off? Tell us a little about you. Where's home and how did you get to where you're at today for leading, the nation's largest youth organization?
Yeah, home for me is Central Illinois, small town, Franklin. And I mean, when I say small, I graduated with 14 in my senior class. And I come from a family of 9. I have 6 siblings. So when your dinner table is about the same size as your classroom at school, you're in a small community. But that was home for me. I grew up on a farm raising corn, soybeans, and we have 200 head of cattle and a feedlot.
Okay.
And from that background, I actually wasn't sure about joining FFA.
Sure.
Going into my freshman year, I was driving with my dad to pick out my classes with my guidance counselor. And I kind of worked up the courage to tell him, like, Dad, I don't know about this whole FFA thing. And he just said, too bad. Shoved me in. And because of his encouragement, because of my ag teacher, I ended up obviously loving the FFA organization. Giving the FFA creed for the first time is such a core memory to this blue jacket and my development in it. And from there, ag sales, agronomy, livestock judging and contests, my supervised agricultural experience, raising turkeys, working on the farm, that love for agriculture, and then that love and appreciation for the people in the blue jacket, that family that I had built, I think that's really what led me here today.
Well, that's awesome. And, I think, we talked a lot about that today when we sat down with our executives, bringing back the vocational side of things to agriculture. Really the hands-on experience is really the secret and the sauce when it comes to vocational agriculture and FFA.
Yeah, and learning to do, doing to learn, it's in our motto. It's exactly what we stand for and the way that we believe education should happen on the local level.
And today you're attending the University of Illinois?
Yep, I'll be coming back as kind of a second semester sophomore when I return after this year of national office. Yep.
All right, awesome. And what are you studying?
Finance and agribusiness is my concentration within the major of agricultural and consumer economics. Kind of a mouthful, but I really like agriculture. I really like finance.
Good deal. Well, we need a lot of great finance folks here in agriculture today. Caroline Groth, welcome back again.
Thank you.
Okay, so where's home?
Home for me is Lexington, Kentucky, so horse country.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. And tell us a little bit about your SAE. How did you get involved in FFA?
Yeah, so take a trip down memory lane real quick. My dad is kind of who got me involved in the agriculture industry and the FFA world. He grew up as a pastor's kid, and there was a guy at his church who raised sheep and had a couple bottle lambs and sent him home with my dad, and he started out raising bottle lambs in his garage, which maybe his parents were not the most thrilled with, but that just sparked his passion for agriculture. He did it all through middle school and high school. He met my mom and they got married, and after they were married, they just knew that they wanted their future kids to be involved in agriculture. So when I was 9, we moved to a farm, bought our first 3 ewes, and I like to say that my supervised agriculture experience, my FFA project, it was all sparked with a 4-H project gone wild. Started my freshman year of high school with 3 head of Southdown ewes, which I showed at the county fair, That's where I met my ag teacher. And then by the time I was a senior in high school, I was running over 50 head of Southdown ewes with my siblings. Yes.
Wow. Wow. All in horse country, too.
All in horse country. So I was the weird sheep kid amidst all these thoroughbred farms.
Well, definitely your signature for sure.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Well, guys, tell us a little bit. There's been so much evolving over. We're getting really close to a 100-year anniversary for FFA.
Mm-hmm.
Been around for about 97, 98 years or so. Where are we at today? Where's the FFA at today in terms of headcount and chapters? The chapters continue to grow even since the days I was a state officer back in Nebraska. Where are we at today, Thad?
Yeah, right now we're over 1 million members, 1,027,000 and counting, and then chapters over 9,200 spread across the United States, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands. And what's unique about our positions is at this scale that FFA is at, we still get to go meet that one member who's just starting out in their journey. And those are the stories that you don't see when you just see the number 1 million.
Right.
But each of those unique individual people at the local level are what makes up our organization.
Wow. And I think you brought something up really important, the word local. And Caroline, we talked about that today with our CEO, Eric Cowling, talking about the importance of local engagement. We need, folks that are locally grown to really help our business, but really help the industry out. And what kind of engagement are you working with as national officers at the local level? Share some of those experiences with us.
Yes, it starts at the grassroots. I mean, the chapter level is where everyone begins their FFA journey. We were both chapter officers, and that's kind of where you get the FFA bug. But as far as throughout our year of service, I'd say a highlight of our year is getting to do those chapter visits, whether we were in chapters in Mississippi or chapters in Georgia or chapters in Nebraska. It's those moments that I'll never forget, getting to teach those leadership workshops to a group of sometimes even 10 to 15 students.
Wow.
But it's in those small groups that you get to have one-on-one interactions and really hear people's stories. And those are interactions I don't think we'll ever take for granted.
Yeah. And Thad, I know you've both been traveling hundreds of thousands of miles this year across, as you mentioned, all over the country. We talked earlier, Caroline, I think you were in Alaska recently.
Yes.
And at that, I think were you in Florida recently? Or
Stopped in Florida in the past month. Yep.
Yeah, just traveling all over. And you shared an awesome story about an FFA member with our executive team earlier today from American Falls, Idaho, about a young chapter member that, was a non-traditional student, but really is doing some exciting things in the world of agri-science.
Yeah, she was researching a new material for semiconductors, specifically in agri-solar. And I'm a little bit out of my element, okay?
Sure,
When
yeah.
she was showing me this agri-science poster, I was just blown away by her intellectual understanding of the topic, the amount of work she'd put into it, and just the passion that she had for this project. She was specifically focused on figuring out if we can sub out silicon for another material, specifically with zinc and copper, in order to maximize efficiency for these agri-solar operations. And she's a junior in high school.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's amazing how much talent is out there across the nation that are FFA members. And, it's great to hear stories like this student here that's very, I'll call them high level, some very high reaching. But it's also important to talk about, we've got a lot of students that are really geared towards, I want to go back to the farm or be involved in production agriculture. And you've seen so many of those kind of students. Caroline, could you share some of those local experiences, maybe with some of those students that want to find their journey back home, maybe in their local community?
Yeah, one thing we really appreciate about FFA is we honor tradition, we honor our history, and our history, our beginnings are those production ag family farm kids. And I think when you talk about those stories, a unique award that we get to give at every single state convention is the State Star Farmer. And that is for a student that they get recognized for their farming operation, their home farming operation. And I'll never forget in Arizona, the young man who won the State Star Farmer, his family came and his family was sitting right behind me when his name got announced, and just the crowd erupted. Like his dad's jumping out of the stands, and his whole family and his whole chapter is just so excited because one thing we do as National FFA is we celebrate those production ag kids, but I kind of want to flip the question a little bit and to say we have over 1 million members that come from all different backgrounds. FFA is so special because every member that wears a blue jacket has a place to belong. Whether it's they're coming from a production ag background or you're like me, coming from Lexington, Kentucky, where there's 90% of the kids in my home chapter who don't come from production ag.
Sure.
We honor rural, we honor suburban, we honor urban FFA members.
Yeah, and those numbers continue to grow, don't they? As you mentioned, well over 1 million members today, and those students are all, most of them are seeking, potential opportunities in agriculture. And as we discussed today, there's so many opportunities that a lot of times folks tend to forget. We just don't need folks in, the production side of things. We absolutely do. We need a wide range of folks from finance, as you mentioned that. But today you had the opportunity to experience some other corners of agriculture. Let's talk about your experience today. Today we sat down with a couple of executive vice presidents for Helena Agri-Enterprises, along with our CEO, Eric Cowling. Tell us what's your takeaway after sitting down with those leaders?
When we had the roundtable and every single leader told us about their journey with Helena, how long they've been with the company, what really stood out to me is the priority that this company places not only on longevity, but on culture and on the family that you build here. Each of them started out in a sales role in a region or in a role on the grassroots level.
Right.
And then they made their way up through this organization. And when you have leaders who understand every level, every tier of the business, why it's important to customers, why it's important to everyone in every role, then you end up with a boardroom that's truly in contact with every single person in your company. And that is not a company culture that is replicated everywhere. But you could see in that boardroom that each of those people deeply cares about where this company ends up and the mission and the product that you deliver to your customers.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We referenced, even Eric, he started off with Helena driving a truck. Working in a warehouse and worked his way up to CEO, and the others have similar stories. So yeah, you're right. Culture is really huge there.
And I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was Brad who we asked at the end. One of our favorite questions to ask before we leave any visit is just for advice, right? We just get to be like sponges this year and like soak up all this wisdom. And Brad says, never arrive. He said it's about work ethic, it's about motivation, and that concept of never arriving, just continuously striving to be better each and every day. And Thad and I, we mentioned in that room, like we've never heard it put that way before, to never arrive. And I think that's such a thing we can continue to a mindset we can continue to use moving forward. And who knows, you might hear it in a national officer speech one day.
That's awesome. Yeah. Brad Shaver, our director of sales and marketing for the Helena Products Group. Great advice. Never arrive. And, both basically, as you mentioned, Carolyn, show up. And Eric Cowling mentioned that as well. So did Phil Hollis. It's important to show up and be active, and no matter what you do, isn't it? So guys, let's talk a little bit about one of our stops today. You got to experience some things in the Helena Products Laboratory, and one of our team members there, you had the opportunity to learn about grounded and some adjuvants. What are some takeaways there, Caroline?
It was awesome. We literally got to put on the safety goggles and the gloves and be hands-on in the lab. And the team members here are just wonderful. They set up all these demonstrations for us, and we literally got to test the products. They set up a fake leaf for us in the lab, and it had like a wax piece of paper over it, and we got to test just the water. And then we got to test the water with induced mixed in and got to see the difference. And I'm such a visual learner, and so to get to literally mix the products with our hands and then get to test them out, we need to do that in the classroom. That was so cool. Yeah.
I mean, Amanda, Trey, Vix, Chris, everyone was so passionate about what they do. And what I really appreciated is when we were learning about grounded, learning about the origins of that product and really the use cases, you can appreciate that formulation in this industry is not just a science, it's an art.
Right.
And as they spoke about that, about the results that you sometimes see, and appreciation for what your farmers are seeing, how you chase those results, and then how you have to go back to the lab, restructure, regroup, figure out why it works the way it does, and then deliver that back to customers. I could just really appreciate the work ethic and the passion that each of them had in taking these formulations, which are incredibly complex, that we were just trying to follow along and understand and deliver those to farmers.
Yeah, you got to learn some new language today, didn't you? I understand. Yeah.
Disodium, octoborate,
yeah.
tetrahydrate,
I'm surprised you remember
or
this.
boron. Either way.
I am. It breaks down to boron. What does that all mean? And it really brings the Latin out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All of that from some of your courses that you may have in college at the University of Kentucky and University of Illinois. Guys, formulations, and you got to do an actual formulation as well. I think you worked with a product called Coron, didn't you?
Yep. It was so fun at the beginning. Before we even began to mix the product, they asked us, what color do you think this is going to be by the time you finish? And so Thad says...
Well, I overthought it, okay? Because if someone asks you that question, the way my dad always would phrase it is, well, the fact that you asked me the question makes me think it's going to be different than my gut, right?
Yep.
So we're looking at 5 trays. 3 of them have a white material. 1 of them's blue. 1 of them's yellow. And I'm going, gut instinct here. Yellow, blue, maybe green, but let's go red.
Yeah, try it different.
Yeah, be different.
And I'm looking, trying to use my context clues. There's all these bottles and things around the room. I'm like, there's a lot of purple. Okay, I'm going to guess purple. Nope. We mix it all up, and at the end, it's green.
It's green. Our signature color, and it's green.
We made it too complicated.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, and Thad, you talked about it. You appreciate some of the things that go on in that laboratory, and for Coron, Coron Metro, the product that you guys formulated today, that product's been in our portfolio for nearly 30 years, and you think of the acres that has helped impact the growth for yield, whether it be a corn, cotton, soybeans, whatever the product may be. That contribution from that laboratory has helped feed the globe for a long time. Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing. And the patience that those people have. I just think about, I'm a person that kind of likes a direct result sometimes, and they're talking about the years that they will spend researching and creating these products. And if they take it to the field and it doesn't work, guess what? It's back to the lab, and they'll spend another year or more researching and tweaking. And I'm like, they've got a lot of patience.
That's true. And Amanda Hendricks, one of our lab leads there at the Helena Products Group, she talked to you about how, hey, sometimes things go wrong on the farm, don't they? And some of the things that their team, helps farmers better understand at the farm gate. Where were some of the things that y'all learned from there?
I want to go back to grounded. When we did this little display setup, she showed us the impact of grounded with, and help me out here.
Sure.
It would have been grounded paired with, not induce, Agridex maybe?
Agridex.
Would that be right?
Yeah,
okay,
very possibly,
Agridex. So we had 2 jars of sand, and at the top on 1 jar of sand, we just put Agridex, and then on the second, we put Agridex mixed with grounded.
Okay.
It's, just yellow droplets at the top on each. Wash them both with water, and then in this 8-inch tube of sand, you can watch as the Agridex, that yellow, instantly sinks through the sand and ends up in the bottom cup there to catch it. But the grounded in the Agridex, the water comes out mostly clear. I mean, a little bit yellow. Some of it's lost, but most of it stays in that layer of topsoil.
And that was probably a product like Prowl or one of those. I don't know if it was Agridex or not in that demo, but definitely grounded can definitely retain that herbicide in that top layer, which is critical for farmers because that's where we need to have the weed seed managed the best, don't we?
And I guess that's maybe not a problem to your original point, but I mean, that grounded use case, as we talked about earlier, that was actually a success that farmers were going, hey, when I'm putting grounded on, it's actually staying on the soil. It's giving me a little bit of benefit 2 weeks later. Right. This is incredible. And in the lab, they're going, well, it doesn't have any charge to it. How's this working out? Maybe we need to go back and figure this thing out.
Yeah.
So being willing to listen to not only the problems, but the success stories from the farm, both skills that you all have used very well.
Yeah, it's interesting to learn, and there's so many stories like that where you're trying to solve one problem and then inadvertently you solve another. And that one has been solved for nearly 30 years, and it's really producing a lot of amazing success for producers.
Yep.
I think I just keep going back to, we sat down in the boardroom this morning, and the first slide, it had your phrase, your people, products, knowledge.
Right.
And it was cool at the beginning of the day. They were like, you're at the people right now, you're meeting us, you're going to learn about our products, and then by the end of the day, you all are going to be knowledgeable. And I feel like we've reached that spot, Dad. We've learned about your products, we've met your people, and had your wisdom poured over us. So thank you.
Well, good. Yeah, we try to bring, a different experience to our visitors and that come to the Helena Products Group and come to Helena, no matter whether it's here in Memphis or a location in Salina, California, or in Douglas, Georgia. We want to always bring those people, products, and knowledge to not just FFA members, but also to our customers and producers around the country. Guys, tell us a little bit, where's your next journey? Where are you headed to?
Yes, so after this visit, we're headed to Ducks Unlimited for a quick visit. We actually get to be on their podcast too.
Awesome.
Two
Great.
podcasts, which is super fun. And we're actually headed back to Indianapolis this evening. Kind of next on the horizon for us is State Officer Summit. So state officer teams from across the country will get flown out or drive to Washington, D.C., where they'll get to meet with our whole team and go through workshops about advocacy, meet with their legislators, also kind of get to be tourists in D.C. for a week. Yep. So our team is working this weekend to kind of continue developing content and preparing for that conference.
That's great. And Dad, how about you? You're heading back with Caroline as well?
Yep, same thing for the whole team. But in between there, we both have an FFA camp on the horizon.
Yep.
Yeah. After Summit wraps up, I have another FFA camp. But really, as we transition out of Summit into the last 3 months of our year, we're really looking ahead to National Convention, which is wild. Doesn't feel like we're at that part of the year yet, but it's coming quickly.
And that'll be at the end of October, correct? In
Correct.
Indianapolis. Yeah. We're excited to be there. Helena Agri-Enterprises will be there with a booth and look forward to see the, 72,000 plus FFA members that make their journey to Indianapolis for the National FFA Convention.
The sea of blue just floods the city.
It really does. And I think for folks that are not familiar with FFA, that's the largest youth-run organization across the country, but that convention is also one of the largest, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Guys, I know we loved having you here today, joining us at Helena. Everything from meeting our executive team and spending time in the laboratory, time with Dr. Aaron Hurt with the research and development. We spent a few minutes with him as well, learning about research. What were some aha moments from Dr. Hurt?
The time-lapse video that we got to watch.
Oh, sure.
I think that was a moment that just hit home for me, where there was the top video that had not used the Helena product, and then the bottom video had, and it was just huge difference in just the initial growth of the plant, from seed to initial growth. I mean, I'm sold after that.
Was that starter shield or
seed shield?
Seed shield. Okay.
Yes.
Yep. No, that product was incredible. And then I really enjoyed hearing about Resgenics.
Resgenics, yeah.
Resgenics, thank you. The ability for a farmer to have a little bit more control over moisture in his crop. I mean, that's obviously the biggest variable for farmers across the country is, are you going to get rain? Is it going to come at the right time? And obviously this isn't a silver bullet, but as you say, it's another tool in the toolbox for how can I continue to supply yield? How can I continue to create the best growing environment for my crop? And Resgenics provides that opportunity.
Right. And we're always excited to share, here at the Helena Products Group, innovation really does never stop. And hopefully you got to experience a little of that today. And so, guys, as we kind of wrap up this episode of FieldLink, we'd like to hear a little bit of your advice as national officers, maybe some insight that you've gained through FFA, and some of the things you've gained as national officers. What's some advice you can share with our listeners?
At every single corporate industry visit we've gone on this year, one thing that has been emphasized and told to us again and again is just the importance of mentorship. And not only having mentors, but having diverse mentors that are at different stages of life, mentors that are in the future career fields that you want to go into, and mentors that you just, maybe you think their job is really cool or like the way that they lead. And I was listening to a podcast the other day from an individual, her name's Kirby Green, and she referred to her group of mentors as a board of directors. And I was like, oh, I like this. I'm going to use that. So I think to all the listeners out there, build your board of directors. Find your group of mentors. Find those people that encourage you, believe in you, and are going to push you to achieve your goals.
No, I think that's great advice, Caroline. And it's important to be very selective. And don't take the first closest friends sometimes. Take those people that might challenge you to be the best you can.
Yep. Ask those hard questions.
You bet. How about you, Thad?
Yeah, when Eric was talking about hard work as we wrapped up in the boardroom today, it brought back a story from when I got to visit Mr. Harry Stein in Iowa.
Yeah.
And I asked him, what's your secret? What's the magic sauce that has allowed him to accumulate 60, 70% of the soybean genetics in the world?
Right.
What has led to that innovation and that success? He looked at me for 1 second, paused, and said, "My chair's worn out."
My chair's worn out.
My chair's worn out. And I'll never forget that out of everything, out of all the skills that he possesses, his ability to sift through data, his ability to find great talent, his chair being worn out and showing up every single day and working hard is the most important piece to his success. And a quote I heard, I have no idea who this is from, that I think pairs with that is someone once told me that love is the greatest form of discipline. In life, you have to find the things that you're willing to get up and go sit in that chair for a long time for. Because if you're not passionate about something, it's really hard to do. But whether that's fly fishing and, spending the time to go out and help others learn, or to go on trips because you love it so much, when you love something, when you're passionate about it, it makes it easier to show up, to stand out, and to spend the time on it.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. And like you mentioned, Eric talked a lot about work, and I think that's something all of us, entering the industry, and all of us have been in the industry, showing up to work. We talked about that, and having that strong work ethic is going to pay huge dividends to all of us someday. Want again, thank you both for coming and spending time with us here in Memphis at the Helena Products Group and meeting our team, our executive team from Helena, Carolyn Groth and Thad Bergschneider. I want to thank you both for joining us here on this episode of FieldLink.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we want to welcome Jody to FieldLink. Jody, boy, we got a lot going on around the world right now. The U.S. just made a major strike recently in Iran, and boy, the markets are reacting. Jody, let's get a market update there, as well as talk a little bit about cotton and, the weather report and how it's impacting corn and soybeans.
All right, Bill. Well, it's good to be back. Yes, we walked into an extremely volatile and active week, and I guess the groundwork was laid last week that Trump had probably had enough of Iran and the nuclear, and these are the things that you're never able to predict how, certainly not the when, but the how, because you look at what happened Sunday night. Crude was up almost $5 a barrel at one point. When it opened, the Dow was down 500 points. And then within an hour and a half, you had everything reverse, because what everyone has come to realize is that the world is now a safer place. If the strikes were as successful as everybody says, then Iran's military is basically crippled. They'll be able to export oil to China, and China's got a vested interest in Iran not retaliating and trying to shut down the Straits of Hormuz, which would, again, rally crude oil prices, because about 20% of the world's supply goes through the Strait of Hormuz. And obviously there's a lot of other commerce, grain, wheat in particular, that goes through there. But if Iran is not in a position to have any military response anymore because they're so weakened, then we're just kind of back to where we were, call it 6 weeks ago before the Israel war started. And I think, it's a good place. The world is safer now. Would all of our biofuels and all of our prices rather have $75 crude than $60 crude? Yes, but there's always a trade-off here, because the margins are going to get tight if crude goes back down to that range we were trading from 58 to 62, and right at a time when we need to scare up some extra demand, because U.S. weather is, I'm getting texts, and I don't want to sound like I'm diminishing anybody that's having a problem, but I'm texting with 7 or 8 of my farmers in Iowa and eastern Nebraska this morning, and they've all gotten 1 to 3 inches of rain. And a couple places needed it more than others. But if you have eastern Nebraska and Iowa on June 24th getting, rain, and it's supposed to rain through the weekend, and a lot of places are expecting 3 to 5 inches, it's an obvious direction on which way the corn market's going to go.
Right. And we certainly have the heat units to help support some of that, that growth in that market. So, the crop for the most part in the Midwest looks pretty darn good based on the reports we're picking up. Still some issues in the South with, delayed planting and some of those kinds of questions still hanging out there. But boy, the crop overall, Jody, from what you're hearing, looks pretty good. And the future looks pretty solid here in terms of making a pretty good yield.
Yes. Yesterday's corn and bean conditions, they fell a little bit, which is a little bit surprising, but they're still at 70% good to excellent on corn and 66% on beans, which is very much in line with moving forward with the weather forecast. Expect trend line yields, and that'll put us at 182 and 53 on yield. But you look at it, Illinois' crop really benefited from some warmer weather last week. Their crop ratings were up 4% on corn, and Iowa is now sitting at 83%, even though it did tick down a little bit because of some western Iowa dryness. But when you look at the two biggest states, you can't dismiss the fact that, and just look out your backyard and say, oh, well, it's ridiculously hot in the South. What heat index all week in Tennessee is going to be over 105. And right. When you and I walk outside to get the mail, you need another shower. But the big thing that's coming up, and that's going to be Monday, June 30th, is the planted acreage report. And it's really hard to handicap this one because weather was so good planting going in, but we know that you've got areas in the Eastern Corn Belt, southern Indiana, western Kentucky, southern Illinois, going up through Ohio and the far Eastern Corn Belt, that there will be some prevent plant taken. So do the extra acres offset the prevent plant or vice versa? And did everybody just say, this price is, I just can't push it right now, I'm just taking the insurance? So Monday's report will be a big deal, because what we don't need to see is a planted corn acreage over 96 million. If it happens to be below 95, then we can find some stability in corn. But that stability is still going to be between 430 and 440. It's not going to be a 460 to 470 range.
Okay. All right. Big report on June 30th coming out here from the USDA as far as that planted report. Okay, let's pivot a little bit to cotton. We've had a little bit of movement there.
Yeah, cotton is starting to show some signs of life. It's one of those things. Sometimes the market's just getting such doldrums that you're thankful you didn't get any negative news. It's not necessarily positive news, but cotton's in a spot where the positive news is just not negative. So as we get moving forward, the crop's in pretty good condition, but there's still that hanging hope out there that the U.S. and China, maybe now with the Iran thing, can begin to move a little quicker on a trade deal, because cotton and corn, the way I see, what I'm reading, will probably shape up to be the two biggest beneficiaries if we can just go back to some sort of phase one trade deal once that gets going. So a little optimistic about cotton. I don't see it going to 80, but I can certainly see it heading towards 70 to give everybody some opportunity.
Yeah, a little bit better news for our cotton producers out there for sure, and we certainly need that, and especially in the Delta region where water's been an issue, and a lot of those acres have been delayed in planting if they are going to be planted. So having a little opportunity there would certainly have a little brighter side for things than the cotton producing side. Well, Jody, I want to thank you for joining us here on this episode of FieldLink. A lot of movement happening in the market, a lot of news making the headlines here as the United States continues to take a leadership role in some global economics as well.
And one thing everybody needs to keep in mind next week with the 30th, the Monday report, is that the 4th of July falls a week from Friday. So we're going to have that 3-day weekend that always has been a really critical pivot point on, the next direction of prices because of the improvement of the crop, and you get a full pollination schedule. So next week is going to have a lot of activity, just like early this week did. So keep an eye on it, have your sales targets in the market, and be ready for some volatility if it comes up.
Great opportunity for next week. Jody, thanks for joining us on FieldLink.
Thank you, Bill.